Good afternoon and welcome back to the Tuesday, June 8th, 2021 regular board meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners. We are on, where am I? Forgive me. We had a minor interruption there just before we started, and we are on item number 11, County Council. And 11A is the third reading and public hearing of Ordinance 21-02, Public Bodies Pay Cost of Collecting Fees and Taxes. This is the time set for a third reading and public hearing for this ordinance. In the matter of amending Chapter 2 to the Lane Code to require public bodies to pay costs associated with Lane County's collection of fees or taxes, excludes ad valorem taxes, adopts the savings and severability clause. A first reading on this ordinance was held May 11th, 2021. The second reading and public hearing was held May 25th, 2021. I am now opening the public hearing and accepting any testimony in support of or opposition to Ordinance 2102. Commissioners, do any commissioners have a conflict they wish to declare? Seeing none. Diana, do we have anyone that would like to provide testimony on this proposed ordinance?
At this time, we do not have anyone signed up to provide testimony, Commissioner Chair Bernie.
Thank you. In that case, the public hearing is now closed for Ordinance 21-02. Is there a motion? Commissioner Vosevich.
So I'll move approval of Ordinance 2102 in the matter of amending Chapter 2 of the Lane Code to require local public bodies to pay costs associated with Lane County's collections of fees and taxes, excludes ad valorem taxes, and adopts a savings and severability clause.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved by Commissioner Vosevich and seconded by Vice Chair Farr to adopt Ordinance 21-02. Is there discussion to the motion? Commissioner Vosevich.
So I brought this concept forward and based on the fact that the city adopted a new payroll tax that required us to extend quite a bit of outlay in setting up to collect and then ultimately annually for collecting that tax. But I didn't bring it up specifically for the city tax, as this is something that can be done by any local government, apparently, is the ability to create us cost on our side to collect the revenue stream for them. Outside of property taxes, which is what ad valorem taxes are for those that aren't familiar with that term, which we are required by state statute to collect and bear the cost of that collection. This does not include transit districts, because transit districts are not a local government entity. They are an entity created by the state, and their payroll taxes are excluded. So this would only be for any new taxes and going forward cost for collection of local government taxes. And I put this forward because one of my issues with this is our resources come from the entire county. All of our taxpayers, whether they live in Cottage Grove, whether they live in Springfield, whether they live in Florence, whether they live in Eugene or Junction City, provide the resources to this county. And for one of those jurisdictions to require folks from all the rest of the county to pay the cost to collect their revenue without reimbursing the county back creates this sort of geographic inequity and a problem. So I think if we approve this ordinance, we will be correcting that issue going forward, and therefore, local governments are free to pass all the various revenue resources they wish to pass. They just have to understand that they're going to have to reimburse the county for collecting those. It also gets to an issue of governments aren't supposed to tax other governments. And there's actually prohibition against doing that. And it's recognized, particularly in the city of Eugene's payroll tax, in that they don't require Lane County to pay the 0.22% that employers pay, because they know they can't collect the tax from the county. And creating cost is almost the same thing as creating a tax on us. So it corrects two things. It corrects the geographic inequities created by us paying for a local tax, and it corrects the issue of taxation of other governments. And I presume that if we created a tax, a city or a local government had to collect, that we would have to reimburse them for the cost of collecting that tax also. So fair is fair. But that's why I put this ordinance forward, is just to kind of correct those two issues. And I believe it's the correct thing to do. And I hope the rest of the board will support me in that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there any other discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote, and it's my understanding, Mr. Mokrahisi, do we need to call roll call votes for this?
Yes, an ordinance.
Okay. Steve Mokrahisi, would you like to delegate someone to do the roll call vote for this, or are you there?
I'll call the roll if you'd like me to.
Thank you, Diane. I was going to ask. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner Trieger.
Aye.
Commissioner Buck.
Aye.
Commissioner Farr.
Aye.
Commissioner Bozovich.
Aye.
Chair Burney.
Aye. Let
The
the
vote
record show.
passes 5-0 with the yeses winning.
5-0 with the yeses winning.
Yeses winning. With the yes in the majority,
I'm
5-0.
going to state this the way a woman named Diana Jones has forced me to state this every time. Ordinance 21-02, in the matter of amending Chapter 2 to the Lane Code to require public bodies to pay costs associated with Lane County's collection of fees or taxes, excludes ad valorem taxes, adopts a savings and severability clause, has been moved by Commissioner Bozovich, seconded by Commissioner Farr, unanimously approved by this board 5-0. Thanks, Diane. I was just getting back at you. We are now on,
You're welcome.
we're now on item 11B. This is the second reading and public hearing for ordinance 21-03, adopting an ordinance to comply with Lane Home Rule Charter. This is in the matter of adopting a redistricting ordinance as required by the Lane County Home Rule Charter, Chapter 3, Section 10E, adopts a savings and severability clause. A first reading was held for this ordinance on May 25, 2021. I will now open the public hearing and accept any testimony in support of or in opposition to ordinance 2103. But first, are there any commissioners that have a conflict they wish to declare? Seeing absolute certainty that there are no conflicts anyone needs to declare, Diana, is there anyone that would like to provide testimony on this item?
Chair Burney, at this time, I have no one signed up to provide testimony.
Well, in that event, the public hearing for ordinance 2103 is now closed. Is there a motion?
Chair Burney, if I may,
Yes.
just one moment before you call for the motion. I want to, for the public's benefit, make sure that it's clear what the purpose of this ordinance is. It's going to be in conjunction with the one that's going to come next. This is to deal with the issue that has been created by our home rule charter and the delay in the census data, getting the census data from the federal government. We just simply can't do the redistricting without it. So this is this placeholder ordinance to make sure we maintain compliance with our home rule charter, and the actual redistricting will be performed by ordinance 2104, which is going to be immediately heard by the board. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you.
Mr. Dingle, this is Diana.
Yes.
Just for clarification, any motion on 2103 needs to have a motion on 2104 at the same time, correct? Because they're joined?
Yes. Well, you mean simultaneously?
Yes. So it's a motion for both. We can't have a motion for one and then somehow not have a motion on the other, correct?
Correct. You could go through, Chair Bernie, you can go ahead and go through the public hearing process for 2104 and then make do motions on both of them.
Diana caught you, Mr. Dingle. I was following.
I know. I didn't know that she did it, Ann. So.
Okay. So how do I do this?
Just go ahead, Chair, and go through the same process you did for 2103 for 2104. The script is there in front of you.
Yep. You're not supposed to tell people that. Okay. Well, apparently we have to vote on these two items as one. Therefore, I also now have to articulate that this is also the time set for a second reading and public hearing for ordinance 2104, the companion ordinance, in the matter of creating an independent redistricting committee to draw boundaries for the 5 Lane County Commissioner positions using 2020 United States Census data, which is, I understand, the issue for us being tardy with this process in that data is late in becoming available. Adopting a savings and severability clause, a first reading was held for this ordinance in May 21, 2025. I will now open the public hearing on both of these and accept any testimony in support of or in opposition to one or both of these ordinances. Are there any commissioner conflicts on this? I apologize for the background noise. In that case, Diana, is there any public testimony for this item?
Chair Bernie, we have no people signed up for testimony for this item.
The chair will entertain a motion. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move approval of the second reading and public hearing. Believe you've closed the public hearing as well for ordinance 21-03 and ordinance 21-04 as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you both. It has now been moved by Commissioner Buck and seconded by Commissioner Trieger. Both ordinances 21-03 and 21-04. Is there discussion to the motions? Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I just really want to appreciate the work that we've done as a board on these items and moving through. My first called for a work session on our census redistricting 2 years ago. And it's been a process, especially since the census has been delayed. But I think we are moving in the right direction as a board to try to get a more hands-off approach to how we redistrict our county. I think what we've got in front of us is some really good language to proceed in that direction. I appreciate everybody's efforts in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I echo Commissioner Buck's comments and appreciate the effort. This feels like a really great process that we're about to embark on. I've shared it with a few folks in the community, and they're folks who had concerns about previous redistricting are really pleased to hear how we're moving this forward. I wanted to, one, acknowledge that a concern I brought up before. I appreciate County Council helping me find where this is differently ordered, the information that I was looking for than when we first started to discuss this. So thank you for that, about ensuring that we adopt something as presented to us by this independent redistricting committee. I wanted to float to the group one thought for a potential minor adjustment to the language which is in the mix of representation. I have one concern that if we are so prescriptive as to say there are exactly equal numbers from each district and we do not get a robust application pool to choose from for each commissioner, whether there's any appetite for considering saying something like a minimum of an effort to make an equal number, but and no fewer than 2 people from any given district or something like that, just to build in a little bit of flexibility should we not have a lot of applicants from any one district. And then didn't know if we also wanted to address, as I raised last time, anything about the 3 alternates to keep a good mix, but not necessarily such a prescribed even number from each district, whether we might be tying our own hands a little bit with something that prescriptive.
Before I call on other commissioners, Commissioner Trieger, if you, it sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that you would then vote no on this so that this could be brought back and modified if a majority of board members agree with what you're suggesting.
Procedurally, I'm open, as this is my first time through this. If there's an opportunity, I don't know if because it's an ordinance that is the only way to move this forward with any change, or if it's possible to pass it with the minor amendment. Procedurally, I'm not sure, but I did bring this up last time, this concern that that we could be building in a little more flexibility so we don't run into problems later that we can't fix.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other commissioners?
Figure out the
Mr. Dingle, your microphone is on. Commissioner Bozovich.
So I just, as an ordinance, one of the things is you have 2 readings, and the readings have to be of the language that is being adopted. So if there's going to be a change in language, we have to make that change and do the reading of that change language today, and have a third third reading on that particular ordinance so that we have the two readings, the proper 2 weeks apart, and we'd have to probably hold the public hearing open in order to do that. So just procedurally, even that minor change is going to require another reading. It just because it is an ordinance. So and I have to be honest, I'm not so concerned about getting 3 people from each district. And I'm a little concerned about language that says no less than 2, because that doesn't say, even if I got 12 people from my district, that a majority of the board could overrule me and only appoint 2 of those 12 people. So they could appoint 4 from another district. That's not saying that would ever happen, but that's what that opens up. Unless there's some kind of other language that says if you have more than 4 applicants, you have to have 3 or something like that. So it starts getting really complex. So I just, I think we're trying a new process for the first time, and I think we've laid out the best thing forward. My idea was to actually do a actual charter amendment and have this written into our charter, but we just ran out of time. The clock kind of got run out on it. So this is the next best thing, but I think part of doing it as an ordinance allows us to see how this goes. And, right after we finish this process, we could pass another ordinance to amend what we did to improve it, So I'm not so concerned about having it absolutely perfect. I think we've gone so far, so quickly now with trying to make this much more independent from the board, that we've done a great job. And I'm not going to get hung up over something as minor as the geographic representation, all that at this time, and delay the adoption and delay us starting to get committee member applications in and try and get things moving so we'll be ready the moment we get the census data. So I'm supportive of just going ahead and adopting the ordinances and moving on.
Thank you, Commissioner, both procedural information and then where you are. And I notice Commissioner Trieger has her hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to be clear. I'm not opposed to this. I will be voting yes to support it. I'm just opening this concept to give it a full airing and vetting and make sure that we had this conversation. Appreciate Commissioner Bozovich's clarifications as I'm learning. And also just a reminder, since he mentioned, wasn't about the board appointing, we are only appointing the first 5. We are not appointing the majority of this commission. That is part of the point of this process. So really, again, just raising it to make sure we're fully airing and vetting all the possible challenges and concerns. And I also appreciate that we can come back and improve upon something that's already pretty darn good. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. I like the geographic distribution as noted in this ordinance, and I'll tell you why. During my 10 years as a Eugene City Councilor, being from West Eugene, time after time after time after time, boards and commissions were lopsided to what is essentially roughly what is Commissioner Trigger's district, but it was the South Eugene council districts. And try as we might, it was difficult to get people to distribute geographically. One time I made a point, I actually stepped down and made public testimony because every single member of the Eugene Planning Commission, if they'd had a child going to high school, that child would have gone to South Eugene High School. So I like this because it forces the county to provide that geographic distribution, which is essential. And sometimes it causes people to think, well, maybe I can skip dinner tonight and do a little bit of work on the civic side. So I like it the way it is.
Is there any more discussion before the chair weighs in? I want to, first off, I've heard nobody raising. I've also received very positive feedback from constituents about this as a process. I also want to make very clear to the public that this process that we're looking at was supported unanimously by all commissioners, no matter their political ideologies, as a fair, impartial, and a way for us to really move away from even the optics of looking like commissioners were weighing in on what their districts would look like. I do have a question for Mr. Dingle, though. Mr. Dingle, as we move forward, when would the redistricting, for what election would the redistricting be effective for?
Chair Bernie, that's obviously going to be dependent upon when we get the census data, theoretically. I know that the clerk is very, very concerned that this gets done before the first of the year. So the first time it would be, the primary in May.
May 2022 primary?
22, yes.
Yeah, I know. It's 2022 next year. It's hard to believe. Is there, and I would also like to call out my appreciation, Commissioner Trieger. You always seem to analyze more granularly and look into both equity and other kinds of considerations. And I, for one, have really enjoyed listening and learning as that's occurred. So I want to thank you for that. And it looks like Commissioner Farr would like to weigh in again.
Just one point that I'd like to make is the last time the Board of Commissioners, prior to my joining the board, had redistricting, they really did one of the heaviest lifts of all, and that was the redistribution that placed Ferry Street Bridge and Sheldon High School in Eugene, and in exchange basically for Glenwood moving to Springfield. It made a great deal of sense, and that was the heavy lift. That was the heavy border lift. So I think the redistricting committee is going to have a lot of work ahead of it, but the big lift has been done as far as I'm concerned. And the only thing I'll point out once again, we really do not want House District 11. We don't want Shed and Brownsville and University of Oregon all having the same representative.
Is there any more? Thank you, Commissioner. Is there any more discussion? Commissioner Bozovich.
I just want to clarify that the districts have to be adopted, final hearings and adopted 6 months prior to any election they apply to. So if we're talking about the May primary, they have to be adopted in December. And by December 18th or whatever day is 6 months prior to the, I don't know what day the primary is. I don't have it memorized, but just so you know, it's not the first of the year. It's actually in December.
Well, if the 6 months is correct, Commissioner, it would be November.
May is the 5th month, isn't it? So 12. So January would be 1, 2. Yeah.
I'll let you do the math on that.
Yeah. Whatever. Maybe I'm counting wrong. Yeah, but still, I wanted to remind. It's not the first of the year. It's 6 months.
Right. Thank you.
So we don't get the census data in time. This may not, and that's one of the reasons why we have to go through that every 10-year adoption, because when the timing of when the last adoption happened will take place probably prior to we even get the census data.
That is the concern of.
Anyone else? Yes, Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I think it will be challenging, depending on when the census comes out and the state does their work, and for us to do our work to get this done by the May election. It very well could go and be effective for the November 22 election, which would make it very challenging for our elections department. I can't even imagine that kind of workload. But it is important that we do it right. And I think I think what we've got in front of us gets us going in the right direction. It is true that maybe we'll find something that we need to adjust for the next time around in another 10 years or 9 years, and as it may be for us. And hopefully we can do an after action review and we get enough applicants that we won't have to worry about the area that's being covered, and that we got lots of public participation. And for those of you watching, or those of you that hear the news, we'd love to have your participation. So when these applications go out, please apply. We want folks to be engaged with what we're doing in redistricting, but it is really important to me. And I think many of us feel that we do this in the right way. I think we've got what we need to proceed.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. We have a rule commissioner. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, sir.
Just a quick clarification, Chair, that I wasn't suggesting, of course, that we had anything to do with House District 13, but the type of manipulation that brought about House District 13 is what we wish to avoid.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other comments? If not, we have a motion on the table, do we not? I've been so enamored in the conversation. It has been, well, let's see if I'm losing it. Was it moved by Commissioner Buck and seconded by Commissioner Trieger that made the motion to approve both ordinances 2103 and 2104, and that is on the table. Is that correct? Unless anyone has further discussion, the chair will ask Mr. Mokrahajski for a roll call vote on this.
Commissioner Trieger.
Aye.
Commissioner Buck.
Aye.
Commissioner Bozovich.
Aye.
Commissioner Farr.
Aye.
And Commissioner Burney.
Aye.
As Diana Jones says, that's a 5-0 vote, and the fives have it. The 5 yeses have it.
Yes, the yeses have it.
Yeses, yeah, there are more yeses than nos.
The yeses win.
Yes, sorry. Okay, I need to work on my color commentary.
Well, that's your phone. That thing's heavier than hell.
Who are we listening to?
I think we have a phone caller that's not muted, Diana.
Okay. At this point, we are on County Council C, announcements. Are there any announcements?
There are a number, Chair Bernie. First of all, just to bring the board up to date, based upon your adoption of these ordinances today, we will send out the applications to they're going to be advertised, and then we're also, you'll recall that throughout the redistricting process that Commissioner Buck mentioned, the various listening sessions, we received numerous emails or emailed numerous groups soliciting their input, and other individuals have responded. We have compiled that list, and that everyone who was solicited and everyone who responded or expressed interest will get an application. I also plan on, at least until the applications close, every time we have county council announcements, I'll remind that we're taking applications and indicate how they can apply, so that I'm going to work with Ms. Jones to make sure that gets on the agenda every time so that people can see that, so that we maybe someone who hadn't heard about it before would. So that's what we're going to do. And then I've also worked with Ms. Betchart, because as Commissioner Buck mentioned, her worst nightmare is that this does not get done because of that charter provision that we have for 6 months, because it would create a ton of work for the elections people if they essentially had two different sets of lines. So what the plan is as soon as we get the committee formed, we're going to get together the group that's the county group, which will be supporting it. We'll get those folks together. We're going to pick a number of dates all the way through the fall that everyone is available. We're going to set up the sessions where they can, the Census Bureau has actual recorded sort of CLEs, if you will, that the committee can sit down and look at and watch, that tells them about the data and how it works and all that sort of thing. We'll have the software done. Basically, we want to have everything in position to literally hit the ground running the day that the census data drops. And then hopefully 3 or 4 meetings or whatever it is, it'll get through that. So we're going to get everything done that we can before the data arrives, and then be ready when it does. The next item I have is one that was raised by Commissioner Buck at the last meeting. We actually had an opportunity, she and I did, to discuss this, and that was about a fireworks ban. I think she came up with an excellent suggestion, which is we could, because again, this happens every year where we're so far down into the process that because it requires the adoption of an ordinance, we are always bumping into the 4th of July. I thought her suggestion was an excellent one, which is the board could consider drafting an ordinance that would be triggered by the Department of Forestry and their declaration of the beginning of fire season. That would automatically trigger it. That would trigger an automatic ban, and it would end when the state forester lifted that ban, and that's done by their authority in ORS 477. So that's something for you to consider there. And then finally, the other thing is there's been a...
Mr. Dingle, could we, well, maybe you go ahead, and then we'll talk about whatever we want to talk about.
Okay. And finally, I have been approached by a law firm that would like the board to hear about the opportunities of potential litigation surrounding the Holiday Farm fire. They are a law firm that specializes in suing on behalf of governmental entities that have received or that have been damaged by wildfires. They've represented a number of cities in California and counties. That would be in an executive session, and it would basically be an overview of how they proceed and what their theories are and those sorts of things. So those are all the announcements I have, and Chair Bernie apparently had a question.
No, well, but I will turn it into a question. I happen to think Commissioner Buck's idea is an excellent idea, but I want to know what actions or discussion need to occur to see if a majority of board members feel the same way.
Mm-hmm. Chair Bernie, you could suggest at the end of the meeting whether there's 3 head nods for county council or staff to proceed with drafting a potential ordinance that would incorporate the ideas of a fireworks ban tied to the declaration of the beginning of fire season by the Oregon State Forester.
Okay. Commissioner Buck, does that meet? Yes. And I noticed Commissioner Bozovich had his hand up.
Yeah, there's a a big difference between the declaration of fire season and the implementation of fire restrictions, and where they stand in the forest and all that. And I'm thinking of everything from the industrial fire precaution levels to what they declare for recreational activities. And I'm not so sure just the declaration of fire seasons the trigger I want to see. I think we have to go beyond that a little bit, because there's a fair amount of fireworks displays that are done fairly safely. I can think of like the Fern Ridge fireworks that are done over the lake. That banning those would not make a lot of sense if we were just on fire season where open burning's not permitted, but you can still mow your lawn after 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I support the idea, but I think the trigger that's being discussed needs to be refined and a little better, because we go into fire season every summer at some point. But we don't always get to the point where fireworks are just stupid and should never be set off and should be banned. Let alone the fact that we can have a whole nother discussion about whether we have an enforcement capacity. But I think it's an idea worth talking about. But I do want to make clear that I want to have a long discussion about trigger.
And Chair Bernie, Commissioner Bozovich, there are a number of, in 470 or 477, 510, and 512, there are a number of restrictions that automatically go in upon the declaration of, and they're not all the ones that you talked about, but no tracer ammunition. And there's like 12 or 13 of them that are automatic when the forester makes that declaration.
So we'll revisit this. I think it's a topic worth, just like Commissioner Bozovich said, worth both revisiting and discussing. I believe fire season this year began in April. And so we will deal with this later this meeting, if that's okay. Okay. Are there any other announcements, Mr. Dingle?
Chair Bernie, there are none.
And are there any questions from the board to any of Mr. Dingle's announcements? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, we now are recessing the Lane County Board of Commissioners meeting, and I am now convening the joint meeting of the Lane County Board of Health and the Lane County Board of Commissioners. We are on item 1 of this meeting, adjustments to the agenda. Are there any adjustments to the agenda from staff? Seeing none. Is there any emergency business? Not only do I see no emergency business, I see no staff, so there must not be any emergency business. Item 3, Public Works, Order 21-06-08-10, in the matter of approving the Lane County 2020 Integrated Vegetation Management Program Annual Report. And I believe Melanie O'Hara, Natural Resource Specialist, will guide us through this item.
Yes. Hello. Can you all hear me okay?
Perfectly.
Excellent. Okay. Hello, Chair Bernie and Commissioners. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to share some details about our program. My name is Melanie O'Hara, and I'm the Natural Resource Specialist for the Road Maintenance Division. One of my duties is handling coordination for the Integrated Vegetation Management Program here at Lane County Public Works, focusing on invasive species control efforts and herbicide data management and support for the Road Maintenance Division. I just wanted to briefly review the basics of our program and its progress over the last year. With the approval and adoption of the Roadside Integrated Vegetation Management Program in 2016, Lane County Road Maintenance Division now operates a limited use herbicide program in conjunction with our standard routine road maintenance efforts. We utilize an adaptive management approach to our vegetation control using various methods, including manual controls like hand pulling and grubbing of small localized invasive species populations, mechanical controls, weed eaters, mowers, tree trimming, brushing, Biological controls, the release of approved insects and pathogens that assist in population control of invasive species. Cultural controls, which includes the use of native and preferred seed mixes to create competition. And then chemical controls, using herbicides under our limited use application guidance. The herbicide component of our IVM program is the most regulated portion and deserves the most transparency regarding accessible information in our resulting management prescriptions. Approval required limited uses focusing on 3 roadside situations: overgrown guardrail vegetation control, noxious weed control of state-listed priority species, and the treatment of stump sprouting tree species after removal within the right-of-way. 3 herbicide products are annually reviewed and approved by the Public Health Advisory Committee for use by our program following specifications recommended by the Vegetation Management Task Force. Those recommendations are now outlined in Chapter 15 of the Lane Code. Our approved products are Vaseline, which is a choline formulation of the active ingredient triclopyr, Milestone with an active ingredient of aminopyrrolide, and lastly, Ecomazepyr 2SL, which contains imazepyr as the active ingredient. Each product was chosen with specific target species in mind. Vaseline to combat woody and herbaceous species such as Himalayan blackberry. Milestone is a broadleaf herbicide that we use to combat the knapweed complex. And then Ecomazepyr is a broader target array, but we mainly use it to combat the various knotweed species. At this time, we see no need for any new products to be approved. Here, I just wanted to provide some examples of what could be considered our biggest vegetation control issue, overgrown guardrails. They present a hazard to both our work crews and the public as well. Not only can they become visibility hazards on curves and corners, but as vegetation encroaches the roadway, pedestrians and bicyclists are forced further into the lanes of traffic, which then presents additional safety issues on the roadway. We also have to think about that guardrails are often placed where road hazards exist, steep embankments or dangerous curves, and that makes mechanical maintenance behind the rails a safety issue for our county employees. Another focus of our IVM program is noxious weed control. Here we have 2 examples of some of Lane County priority weed species targeted for herbicide control efforts. Japanese knotweed is on the left and puncture vine is on the right. Both species present their own challenges and detriments. Knotweed's very persistent, resprouting from the tiniest fragments and can damage pavement with its aggressive growth, and our mowers tend to assist in its spread. Puncture vine can harm pedestrians and their dogs and out on walks, and their spiny seed heads that embed in shoes and feet can even pop bicycle tires. Lane County looks to maintain and foster partnerships to assist in targeting noxious weed species and in determining priority locations for future herbicide control efforts. In the past, we've been working with watershed councils to assist in control efforts that combat species like knotweed at the watershed level by facilitating herbicide applications within the right-of-way. Our program is also developing plans to focus control efforts on priority species on roadways adjacent to or leading into county, city, and federal natural areas to help stem the spread. We're also looking to develop outreach associated with private landowners for species such as puncture vine that we may be able to gain control of within the right-of-way, but without landowner participation on private lands, we'll face constant sources of reintroduction, as this species in particular likes disturbed areas and is spread through the movement of farm equipment and vehicles. We expect most of our treatment efforts to occur over several years before seeing marked improvements. Here, we've actually had great results on a knotweed patch out on the Northwest Expressway. This picture was taken in 2018 in the fall, and it's a very expansive patch of Japanese knotweed. It's actually a great example of adaptive management at work looking for the best control responses. We found that if we cut back a site typically by June, this allows enough regrowth that we can make a fall herbicide application with decent control results. Otherwise, by fall, the plants reach 6 to 10 feet in height, making adequate coverage of an herbicide application very difficult. This is that same site in the summer of 2020 after 2 applications in the falls of 2018 and 19. We saw almost no regrowth and used a hack and squirt method of application to individual canes at the end of last summer. Our last scenario for treatments are the numerous tree species that grow within our rights-of-way that are considered stump sprouting tree species. These have been pretty limited in application this far, but we're developing some protocols for tracking and having this tool available as needed. Our program really took to heart the recommendations of the Vegetation Task Force and has incorporated safeguards for public health and safety. We provide 7-day advance notice to our applications with signs on the impacted roadways, as well as posting on our webpage. As well, biodegradable signs stating the date and product used for an application are posted at each application site. We also continue to incorporate public accessibility and input into our program. Our No Spray Area program provides the public with a voice, allowing them to opt out of herbicide applications that may occur within the right-of-way directly adjacent to their parcel. Our applicators have mobile tablets with access to program data that allows them to incorporate necessary components in real time. On this slide, the green lines represent guardrails that receive no herbicide application because they are adjacent to the red parcels, which represent No Spray Area program participants. The yellow lines represent guardrails which received an herbicide application, and it also notates their overall vegetation condition. This one falling into the medium category, which consists of non-native vegetation encroaching up to or within 4 to 5 feet of the guardrail. On our IBM webpage, the public can gain access to all the components of the program. There's a current year dashboard and map providing up-to-date treatment locations, no spray area enrollments, the approved product list, and guardrail and noxious weed locations. We also provide links to dashboards that provide previous year summaries and treatment locations, monthly spray report summaries, and include access to the annual reports. The webpage is still a work in progress, but we hope to create a resource for the public, not only on our program, but to provide valuable information on things like our approved products, best management practices, and fact sheets for noxious weed species. In addition, every 3 years, noxious weed surveys based on priority weed densities will be performed along county road rights-of-ways during summer to assist in expanding our county noxious weed database in support of future management decisions. As always, mechanical and manual vegetation control is the county's primary focus for our roadsides. Our herbicide component really affects a tiny proportion of our 1,400 miles of county roads. We have no plans for any product changes or requests and additional products this year. This past year, we reached slightly less guardrail vegetation assessments than in the previous year, but last year's efforts were hampered because of the related impacts of COVID on staff coordinations. We surveyed right around 23% of our existing guardrails, making applications to about 20%. It is important to remember that not all surveyed rails receive an application. Some are in no spray areas, and some just don't have the emergent vegetation needed for control measures. We still do anticipate that these early years of the program will have higher occurrences or instances with a need for herbicide applications before we begin to see a decrease in overall application rates. We continue to focus on ways we can improve all components of our program, looking for ways to broaden our knowledge base and continue keeping up with current applicator license requirements. We continue to value public feedback and listen to their concerns in order to make potential adjustments to program components. We've changed the timing of some applications in order to increase protection of pollinators. We're currently looking into replicating some components of ODOT's Adopt a Road program that focuses on noxious weeds, maybe allowing constituents to assist in noxious weed maintenance in order to avoid an herbicide application. In closing, our program is always looking for opportunities for partnerships and outreach or educational endeavors in noxious weed management. These assist in our prioritization of control efforts and typically end with mutually beneficial outcomes. We intend to continue to present accessible and accurate information in the hopes of providing insight to our vegetation management processes from planning and implementation through monitoring and review. Thank you all for your time and be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Ms. O'Hara. Even though your screen says Orange Schumacher, we know who you are.
We had some technical difficulties earlier.
No problem. Do any members of the board have any questions or comments they would like to direct to Ms. O'Hara? Commissioner Krieger.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. I just have if I'm understanding, it was a little hard to read the graphic. It looks like 695 of a little shy of 41,000 parcels are in the no spray program. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
And so what do we do to service those parcels?
So we're still in the works, the early stages of this, but now We send a crew out. It's typically a rainy day work detail kind of thing, where they will go out and make attempts for weed eating, that type of mechanical maintenance behind those guardrails.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. You know, I've had an opportunity to pave some of our roads or resurface some of our roads. And when you're waiting for asphalt trucks, you get to talk about all kinds of things with the people who are actually doing the work out there. It's enjoyable repaving the roads. One thing that they pointed out several years ago when I first repaved is that there was a preponderance of vegetation sneaking under the shoulders and actually causing moisture incursion beneath the asphalt and causing buckling. I think that we've addressed that issue. Can you speak to that, or am I asking a question that I should have prepared you to answer?
If Oren is available, Oren may have a better grasp on the details to that question.
Chair Bernie, commissioners, are you able to hear me?
Loud and clear.
Excellent. I'll take the head nods as a yes. Yeah, it's a great question, Commissioner Farr. I don't know if we've resolved that issue. What we try to do is maintain a scalping program where we encounter water issues at vegetation and sediment buildup. What is occurring is water does pool if the vegetation or roadside debris builds up above the surface of the asphalt, and it pools water, which allows increased penetration there at the road shoulder. That does cause us issues. We feel that we are able to manage it, maybe not fully in the capacity we might want, but with our mechanical program, we are able to blade and grade all those shoulders to keep the water issues down.
Thank you for that answer, Oren. I think in the road crews have not mentioned it to me didn't mention it the last time I paved with them. It seems that they're satisfied with the work that's being done. I guess they were more concerned about the condition of the roads as opposed to the workload that's placed upon the individuals who are mechanically or manually removing the debris and the vegetation. Thanks, Oren. I think you've answered my question.
Great, thank you. Chair Bernie, commissioners, if you don't mind, I would like to bring up a topic here real quick. We have presented this since 2016. Actually, we've been providing annual reports since 2005 when I arrived at Lane County regarding our IVM program. As Melanie noted, in 2016 and 2017, after the conclusion of the Vegetation Task Force, Lane Code was changed and adopted by the board. And in part of that change, there was a bit of nearsightedness on our behalf about the order of which this presentation to the Board of Health needs to be presented. Since 2016, we have been doing this as an order, requesting approval by the Board of Health. In the changes, Lane Code Section 15.530 only requires that the board have a presentation, and an order is not required. In today's recommendations, we are asking for that order, as that's been past practice, but I wanted to bring that forward to the board, that our plan moving forward, and even today, if the board so wishes, is that we would move this to a discussion item only as a presentation, not requiring action of the board. So I just wanted to bring that to your light before there was any vote or discussion beyond what we've talked about so far.
Thank you, Oren, very much. Are there any other questions or comments regarding the presentation or for Oren?
Nothing further from staff.
Well, I see none. Given that this is on our agenda as an order to approve, I'm going to, even hearing what you said, I'm going to suggest we do that. So is there a motion on the floor? Vice Chair Farr.
Chair Bernie, for Alt Lang Syne, I move order 210608-10 in the matter of approving the Lane County 2020 Integrated Vegetation Management Program annual report.
Second.
Forgive me, Commissioner Bozievich, because I caught you wanting to make that order right after I called on Commissioner Farr. I apologize. Commissioner Farr has moved and Commissioner Bozievich has seconded Order 21-06-08-10, in the matter of approving this Integrated Vegetation Management Program Annual Report. Is there discussion to the motion? Commissioner Bozovich.
So I just want to say quickly, thank you to Melanie and Oren. This program's turned out really well. Most of the board wasn't here when we made the change from an absolute ban on the use of herbicides to this very limited application of it. And the change was made by using a citizens advisory committee to draft the plan. And Oren did such a wonderful job leading that it was a consensus of the committee to approve the plan going forward. And that included farmers that were extremely concerned about invasive weeds and folks from Beyond Toxics on that committee came into unanimous consent. So when you get folks from that far of the extremes together and they all agree on a plan, somebody did a really good job facilitating that committee, which Oren did. And the fact that we don't have a bunch of emails asking us not to approve this plan or a bunch of emails asking us to strengthen it shows that we've found the good middle, and we're doing a good job of trying to prevent the spread of noxious weeds, because Oregon and Lane County's ag side of our economy is a big piece of our economy, and it has a huge impact on not just things like bicycle and pedestrian safety, but also the hay farmers and the seed growers in the valley if we start getting a lot of invasive noxious weeds. So I really appreciate the work that's been done, and I think you guys are doing a great job. I'll look forward to next year's report, but not having to actually vote to approve it, because I know that we're just doing such a good job with this program. We'll just keep carrying on. So great work, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'm going to call for a vote on the order. All those in favor of Order 21-06-08-10 made by Vice Chair Farr, seconded by Commissioner Bozovich, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Order 21-06-08-10 made by Vice Chair Farr, seconded by Commissioner Bozovich, is approved unanimously 5-0. And I'm really bummed that we don't get to hold that little control thing over you anymore, but it sounds like you're doing a pretty good job. Thank you both very much, Mr. Schumacher and Ms. O'Hara. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner.
We are now going to adjourn the joint meeting of the Lane County Board of Public Health and the Lane County Board of Commissioners. And we are going to rejoin the June 8th, 2021 meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners. We are on item 12, Public Works. 12A is a discussion item in the matter of providing a climate advisory committee and climate action plan update. And I know there are a variety of people here, and perhaps Mr. Hurley and Mr. Nystrom can lead this discussion, or at least initiate it.
All right, thank you, Chair Bernie, and good afternoon, Commissioners. And I'll let Mark carry the show here. Mark's doing a terrific job keeping our climate action plan work moving with good progress. And we're here today just to provide you an update on that work, in particular, our Climate Action Committee. And we have our chair and vice chair here from that committee. And I know they're excited to tell you about the work that they've been doing. So I'll just pass to Mark here, and I'm sure he'll introduce our guests. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Chair Bernie and members of the Board of Commissioners. I'm Mark Nystrom. I'm your climate strategist, and we're going to kick it off today by having our chair, Haley K. Scott, and our co-chair, Amanda Astor, provide a quick update on the Climate Advisory Committee. I did just want to note that a couple of conflicts popped up. So Haley and Amanda are going to only have about 30 minutes. So just to give you a heads up, and I'll use a little bit of the time at the end to give you a climate action plan update.
May I just proudly say that Ms. Kay Scott is my Springfield appointment. I'm sorry, Haley, but guilt by association. And Ms. Astor is Commissioner Bozovich's appointment. And it's been wonderful to see this leadership emerge from the group. And I'm sorry for the interruption, Haley.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. So hello, commissioners. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to provide an update on the Climate Advisory Committee. So again, my name is Haley, and I chair the Climate Advisory Committee, and I am also a climate justice grassroots organizer with Beyond Toxics and the NAACP Eugene Springfield during my day job. And we have our co-chair, Amanda Astor, here to help me just give a quick update on where we're at with our work at the CAC. And so, I'm also hoping if we have time, we have a few questions for you all, and we would be happy to take any questions you have as well. And so at the end as well, hoping to provide an update on what I'm doing with our community members with the Lane Climate Equity and Resilience Task Force. And so I just want to let you all know in terms of like our schedule and our work plan, we will be holding a special meeting on Tuesday, June 15th from 5 to 7. To discuss recommending countywide greenhouse gas reduction goals for the climate action plan itself. And then our next meeting as the broader committee is on June, I'm gonna say 25th at 12:30. And so we're hoping with that special meeting that we can create a really grounding document just to help us figure out how we wanna execute our work plan. And so we did just approve a work plan to work from. And so just a little bit more background though, that I think would be helpful to voice is that we understand as a committee that we were established by the board to provide recommendations and advise the Board of Commissioners on the county's ongoing climate work. And so in order to best meet the intent of the CAC, the committee, we feel that we have to anchor our work in the Climate Action Plan's Phase 2, which is to develop a comprehensive countywide plan with aggressive goals and strategies and to establish a countywide community target and high priority areas of action. And so we just copied and pasted pretty much that piece from the resolution that was passed last year in February 2020 by the board and put it into our work plan. And so this, again, I keep saying work plan again, but that it lays out a set of priorities and we're hoping that it'll serve as a flexible guide for our work. And so the way it's set up is that it shall allow for emerging topics of interest to be discussed as they develop. And so in order to provide informed recommendations to the board, we have begun to move forward in convening relevant stakeholders to give us updates and overviews of existing or future climate and sustainability work. And so I was just going to read really quickly through our priorities, which are based off of the results that Mark Nystrom received in his Climate Action Plan survey that was launched a couple of months ago. And so the big one we just heard about was transportation and road infrastructure. And we were able to hear from Aurora Jackson, the general manager from Lane Transit District, about their sustainability work and their plans. Our next topic of interest is emergency response and public health. And we feel that that's very relevant right now as we come upon a most likely intense fire season. And so we want to see what types of recommendations can we provide right now in the short term. Then we're also looking at, we have a lineup for energy as a priority area. We have land use and real estate outlined. And then finally, we've included county infrastructure as a main topic of interest. And so this is kind of what we're using to form and guide our work in the next year. And so, or the next couple of months, I mean. And then let me get back to my notes. And so the steering committee and the larger committee together, we've been having quite a lot of discussion around the intended purpose and the scope of the CAC. And so again, in the resolution that was passed, it states that the CAC is to provide recommendations to the board regarding climate action. And so we kind of feel that there's a little bit of vagueness in there. And so we've come prepared with a couple of questions. And so I did want to invite Amanda to come forward because I think she was working on some questions herself. And so I'll just pause there.
Yeah, thanks, Haley. So for those that do not know me, I'm Amanda Astor. I'm a candidate certified forester, and I work in my day job as a forest policy manager for Associated Oregon Loggers. So I really try to represent that rural voice and working lands. And so it's been really fun to get to know Haley, and it seems like kind of odd bedfellows, if you will, beyond toxics and loggers coming together and working on climate change. But I think it's been really interesting and really rewarding. So like Haley said, we do have some questions for you guys as far as kind of the how we can best serve you as advisory to the Board of Commissioners. And so some of the things that we were grappling with is, of course, we've got Mark here from the county working on the CAP. And one of the things that we really wanted to kind of ask you guys is, how do you see us working in conjunction with the county? Do you see us more working on kind of more emerging issues separate from the climate action plan? Do you see us more working directly within the climate action plan? I think that we're just very curious to hear from you guys on that point.
So I guess at this point in our very short, brief update, we would like to open it up to you all and just hope to hear, I guess, your initial response to Amanda's question.
Well, what I'm going to request, if I might, as chair, is Mark, is the presentation complete before we do open it up? And when we do, Amanda, if it takes too long, I'll ask you to restate the question and so that we don't lose it. But Mr. Nystrom, is that the presentation?
I have a brief presentation from staff, but if it's okay with you, Chair Bernie, both Amanda and Haley have to leave soon. So I'm sorry about that, but I'll present after they're gone.
Well, there you go. Do any board members have any comments on what you've heard or any responses to the question posed by Amanda? I may, but I'll absolutely wait to be after board members have had that opportunity. I see no hands. Oh, excuse me, Commissioner Buck.
I just wanted to ask if you could repeat the question.
Go for
it. Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Chair Bernie and Commissioner Buck. The question is, as we move forward in this work plan that we've laid out, and hopefully you guys received or have seen in meeting materials, we have this plan that kind of has these different topics, but we are still trying to better understand how the board would like us to work in conjunction with the county and what the county is doing for the CAP, or if you would like that sort of done at the county level with county staff and us to be working on other more emerging issues.
Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I would like, again, as the newest one and just learning this, I guess I need a little bit of an explanation of what the body is that you're referring to that isn't already a part of the county and the county's work, because my understanding is that the Climate Advisory Committee exists to help advance the work of the Climate Action Plan and to bring a community voice, to bring content expertise, to bring a range of understanding of the issues that we're trying to address through the plan to the table, and then bring to us the recommendations for how to address the pending climate crisis with urgency, but also practically as it relates to the opportunities that we have as an organization, as a county. So I'm a little confused about what the group is that you're representing, if it isn't the group that's already there to help advance and make sure the climate action plan is getting at what we need to address this crisis.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Traeger. And I'm wondering if Mark could step up and maybe help us rephrase our question. And so, we have county staff here who are working on the internal climate action plan to reduce the internal county's greenhouse gas emissions. And I think the question that we're trying to bring forward is, would you like us as the Climate Advisory Committee, who are made up of community leaders and representatives and different organizations, to help inform what staff is doing? Or would you like us to, like you said, what you just proposed, to bring forward like urgent recommendations to address short-term matters that are affecting or impacting your constituents? And so, Mark, please come forward and help us out with that, maybe.
Excuse me, Mark, before you, Commissioner Farr, do you want to speak now or after Mr. Nystrom speaks?
I could say a few words right now, Mark, and I'm anxious to hear what Mark has to say as far as clarification. But, we have advisory committees. We have had in a number of areas. I serve on the public health. I serve as liaison to the Public Health Advisory Committee and the Mental Health Advisory Committee, the local Drug and Alcohol Policy Advisory Committee, the Law Library Advisory Committee. Each advisory committee does exactly that. It looks at a variety of issues, whether they be emerging or existent, whether they be currently in policy or looking for new policy, and make recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners on the items in their purview: public health, mental health, law library, drug and alcohol. And that generally is a fairly broad charge that they have, and they really do address just about anything. The Public Health Advisory Committee just recently helped us to make a resolution surrounding racial bias, for instance. So there's a great deal of breadth in what can be addressed. Then it becomes an issue for the Board of County Commissioners as to how we handle the recommendation or the policy recommendation. That being said, this is brand new. Public health's been around a long time. Mental health has been around a long time. Law library, they've all been around a long time. So really, you're treading new ground as far as I can see, just a little bit. However, I don't see it being much different in terms of the types of issues that you address in the other advisory committees that are already existent. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mark, for letting me go ahead here.
Thank you, Commissioner Farr. Mark, please.
Thank you, Commissioners. And Commissioner Farr, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think one of the challenges that we're facing right now is that staff was charged, me and my climate action team have been charged with creating a climate action plan. And so this work is happening concurrently with the work of the Climate Advisory Committee. And they're providing me input on goals and targets. And that's that special meeting coming up in a week or so. But I think one of the questions that the committee is wondering about is are there any particular areas that outside of that kind of community-wide climate action plan that are of particular interest to the Board of Commissioners? Because frankly, there's just such a wide breadth of potential actions that we could be taking. And I think that the Climate Advisory Committee was looking for an attempt to try to narrow that down a little bit and see if there's any particular areas that the commissioners themselves would like us to focus in on. You're absolutely right. We do have a remarkable lineup of extremely talented and well-educated and knowledgeable people. So we can contribute in a wide variety of areas.
Commissioner, if I may first, Commissioner Buck.
So I'm going to take a stab at this a little bit. I think from my perspective, an important aspect of the advisory committee and the climate action plan as a whole is what can we do as commissioners with our jurisdiction to mitigate climate change? What actions can we actually implement that can make an effect? If there are items coming to the board in which we really don't have jurisdiction for or are out of the scope of the county, the only alternative would be then a recommendation to advocate, maybe even from a legislative point of view or some other policy point of view, an avocation of something. But for me, I really personally focused on what we can do as a body within the county to affect change.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Commissioner Farr, did you have your hand raised?
Just one slight addition to my earlier statement, and that is, in addition to the general policy advice that's given every now and then, an advisory committee gets a very specific charge. For instance, we had issues in county parks that were beginning to surface, some loud music in some parts, some illegal camping in other parks. So our Parks Advisory Committee was charged by the Board of Commissioners specifically to draw up a draft of a parks master plan, which it took them a couple of years to do it. And once they did it, it was really a piece of genius work. But it was very specifically a very specific assignment by the Board of County Commissioners. So we are lacking, I believe, specific assignment at this point in time, and it may be something that we may want to consider for the future, is do we have a very specific action item, such as the Parks Master Plan, to assign this committee? So I'd like to hear other comments on that.
I've been done. Yes, Commissioner Tree here. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair. So if I'm understanding, and I really appreciate Commissioner Buck's framework because that's important. My understanding was that the Climate Action Plan identified that there would likely be actions we can take internally as an organization, but then also community-wide actions that can be taken that we do have jurisdiction over, driving or creating the guardrails around those activities. So keeping it within our jurisdiction is important. So for example, something I've been in contact with Mr. Nystrom about, building electrification, that we have opportunities with any capital projects, for example, to prioritize looking at clean energy as how we run those buildings. Is that the kind of example of a project? Because my understanding all along was that the Climate Action Plan would have both inward facing to the organization and outward facing within our jurisdiction actions that we would be considering. And so it would be my assumption that those are the kinds of example things that the committee would be bringing to us for consideration.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to jump in because I see no hands up at this moment. I would like to remind the commissioners and our wonderful volunteers that there are two phases to this, as Mr. Nystrom said. There is an internal ops phase, if you would, which is moving forward, and I'm sure we're going to hear about that this afternoon. There is also the bigger opportunity to utilize an advisory body to both convene others to help us achieve a goal. Right now, the Climate Action Plan, in lieu of the Board of Commissioners having a goal, is going to be determining a first recommendation. And Haley, correct me if I'm saying anything that is incorrect, but a first recommendation that will relate probably towards a year by which Lane County ought to become carbon emission neutral. Right? Now, within that, the Climate Advisory Body also has this incredible power, I observe, to convene. They convened Aurora Jackson and Ms. Hale, who is LTD's sustainability manager, that reported back on LTD's action plan to get to a carbon neutral lane transit district. And I forget the year, 2035, 2045. Mark, what year was it? Do you recall? No. I also am aware that there is a conglomeration of all of the publicly owned utilities in Lane County, which serves the vast majority of Lane County, that they will be, because of purchasing agreements that are being put in place right now, all utilities with the exception of Pacific Power, which is investor owned, in Lane County will be carbon neutral by 2034. So we have the opportunity to listen to leaders from the utility sector, the energy sector, leaders from schools, leaders from other sectors of the economy, and learn what their climate plans are and what their goals are and what metrics they are using, so that we can try and get our arms around what's happening in Lane County, and is it consistent with any recommendations the Climate Action Committee brings to this body. So for me, that's a convening role, and it's an advisory role. And I would hope that the next time the Climate Advisory Committee provides an update, there's actually, as Commissioner Farr said, who has far, no pun intended, who has far more experience with advisory committees than I, but recommendations for the board then to grapple with something that's on the table for us to deal with.
Commissioner Burney, I have to go. So,
Oh, I'm sorry, Amanda.
yeah, so I am gonna leave you guys, but thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure Haley can relay any other questions that you guys might have to me.
Thank you. I didn't realize you had to leave right this moment. And Mark, my understanding was that there's another member of the committee, Dr. M. Jackson, who due to plane delays is not able to be with us at this moment. But I would like the group to know that we have National Geographic's senior glaciologist who has her own Netflix series, who happens to be a Eugene resident and has never done any work in this community because she is an international person. And because of COVID, she also has been giving her time to this effort, and it's really been tremendous. Now, having said that, Chair Kate Scott, Mr. Nystrom, are you getting information you want, or do you want to pose other questions to the board, or do you want other feedback?
I'll go ahead, but I did want to acknowledge that I thought I saw Commissioner Bozovich's hand up, so I don't want to take your role, Commissioner Burney, but I would like to hear from him if he had something.
Commissioner Bozovich knows that if we don't want to hear from you. He won't call on me when he's chair either. No, I'm sorry. Commissioner, I didn't see your hand. I apologize.
Yeah, I was but Amanda interrupted to say she had to leave. That's why you didn't see my hand up. You know, I'll be honest. I voted against forming this committee. I have voted against allocating budget dollars to this, and I'll again state that I think there are far higher priorities for Lane County to address than are, less than 0.1% of the population of the U.S. in a state that has a lower carbon footprint than the U.S. that's been decreasing over the last 20 years. This is not a priority. We could be spending that money on public safety and LCSO, or we could be spending it in land management to get permits out faster. But this should not be our priority. So when you ask me about the role of this committee, it's very difficult for me to answer because I don't think the committee should be there in the first place. I suggest the board all get and read this book. Okay? It's a book by a scientist that was in the Obama administration. And it's a very balanced book. It's not denying that the climate's changing. It's talking about the state of the science and our ability to make any change in the Earth's climate and our ability, whether we're even making the correct changes, and how little impact humans actually have on the global climate compared to our understanding of what's happening naturally. So please go out and get the book, read it. I mean, it's even endorsed by somebody from the Harvard Kennedy School, Chair Burney, which I know you like those folks. I suggest you do that and rethink about spending $300,000 a year on staff and consultants to address something that is being self-addressed and we really can't make much of a difference in when there's so many other high priorities, whether you want to make it our rural patrol issues, whether you want to make it our inability to get permits out in a timely fashion, or whether it's our ability to deal with our unhoused crisis in this county. So I just want to kind of just put that out there and let you know that, if it were up to me, we wouldn't even have the committee. So however you guys want to impact a climate action plan that I'm probably going to vote against when it comes before the board, have at it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other commissioners that would like to speak? I would like to clarify to my friend, Commissioner Bozovich, that I don't like or dislike the guys at Harvard the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. There was an earlier exchange between us where I mentioned that I knew someone that was teaching there. That's all. And I gave you the history of that person, if I recall. Are there any other comments at this point to Haley's question? Hey, please, Ms. Scott.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide a response, and this might be more with my climate justice grassroots organizer hat on, but I will just say as an update, a lot of our conversations within the Climate Advisory Committee have really focused as well, in addition to like mitigation actions, on resilience. So we know, again, I have to keep referencing it, we've been talking a lot about this upcoming fire season. And so I think something that we're really just trying to look for guidance on is if we can bring forward specific recommendations on what we think our community leaders, our stakeholders, our county staff, city staff can do to address those issues that we're about to face. Because we know one thing, and again, this is probably overgeneralizing, but just from my experience last year, I've been a resident here since 2014. We had a lot of people coming into the Eugene Springfield area last year. And I know just as a staff member with the NAACP who provides community resources, there was a high demand for resources, specifically food, specifically housing. And I still, again, with my organizer hat on with the Climate Resilience and Equity Task Force, we have a gentleman from the Blue River area, and he was letting us, he actually had to tune into one of our meetings using a hotspot somewhere in Eugene. And so he still was unhoused, and, but he really cares about this work. And so it's been really helpful hearing from everyone here that it really sounds like we can bring specific recommendations for the board to grapple with. And I think that's the word I heard before. And so I'll just say that it's still been helpful. And so thank you, Commissioner Bozovich, for just, I don't know, I find it really helpful to hear from all sides of the spectrum. And I just wanted to provide that comment. And I probably won't have time to ask this last question, but it was around really focused on if we can come forward and provide regular updates to the Board of Commissioners. And so I'm not sure if Mark, as a staff member, can help carry or continue that question, that conversation. But that's what I have for you all. So I just want to thank you all for your time again this afternoon.
Before you leave, Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. K. Scott. Really appreciate that response. And it just has me thinking, because you were able to tie together, Commissioner Bozovich's comments that we have a lot of really big issues to grapple with in this county. And I don't think it's a zero-sum game, and we have to be able to manage and address more than one problem at a time. And so I would just ask, since you just so succinctly connected how addressing climate and some of the things you might bring forward also help get at or are connected to some of these other issues that people in our community are facing around lack of access to clean water, around fire protection, and around disaster management, resiliency, around hunger. So I would just really encourage and request that when you bring actions back to us for recommendation, anytime you can help tag them to some of these other issues to help keep them relevant in a number of spheres, the better, because really all these issues are interconnected and they're really all public health issues. And so I think that will hopefully help Commissioner Bozovich see that many of the issues that he cares about are actually being addressed through some of the recommendations that this committee might bring forward.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And Ms. Scott, if I could speak on behalf of the board, of course, the Climate Advisory Committee can provide this body updates. And of course, the Climate Advisory Committee can make recommendations that this board will then grapple with. And Mr. Nystrom should have shared, that should be shared with you. He knows the process, and the answer is yes to all your points. Thank you. Mark, are we through the presentation, or are you gonna say something?
I have a few more minutes, and I know Haley needs to jump off, so I just want to say thank you and just say to the board how impressed I've been with her leadership. It's a great board. We have a lot of really committee, excuse me, and it's a great board too. But it's a great committee to work with. But there's a lot of inexperienced people who have never participated in a public process before. So there was a pretty steep learning curve for a lot of people. And I think we're through that now, and now we're working on action. So I think you'll see the next time they come around, they'll have more recommendations for you. So I just want to say thank you to Haley for her great leadership.
Okay, well, thank you all again for your time, and look forward to hopefully bringing some good actions forward down the road. So thank you.
Thank you, Haley.
Chair, if it's okay, I'll just go forward so that I can finish up the climate plan update. In your packet, you should have received a 2-page update that says Lane County Climate Planning Update, June 8th, 2021. The document, and I'm not going to read it to you, obviously, that would be a waste of time, but I wanted to just highlight a couple of things to you. The first part was all about the phase 1 of the climate action plan. That's our internal climate action plan. Last June, we set a series of goals and targets, and those were discussed and then approved in October. And I want to provide you an update on those action updates. If you go through the tables that are there, it's broken down by facilities and fleet, supply chain, and then landfill and the kind of agency-wide actions. And I just made a really simple set of icons for you. Green means that they're on target. We're good to go. We're actually ahead of schedule on most of those. And yellow, they still need some more attention. But as you see, for the vast majority of those actions, we're either way ahead or on pace for getting those things implemented. And again, a lot of these are actually cost neutral or cost savings. One of the neat things that has come out of this internal climate action planning is recognizing that we needed to do a better job with our utility usage in our facilities. And so we've been working, or I've been working with facilities. They've been doing the bulk of the work. But in having an energy tracking program that will help us in the future, just ensure that we don't get any unusual spikes in our electricity or gas usage. So that's exciting. And then if you look to the third page of that handout, there's a countywide climate action plan outreach and engagement update. We're really excited. We're about to roll out a big public engagement process. The version you had a typo on it. There's a launch promotional page that is meant to be June 11th, not June 1st. That was my bad. We're going to have what the folks who do this kind of thing call a splash page. That will be a web page that just kind of gives people information and how they can sign up for our outreach events. We're going to have an online open house that allows folks in Lane County to participate and provide us feedback in both English and Spanish around what's known as high impact practices, and then let us know if there's any actions that they would like to see that might be missing. And then we're going to have 5 meetings that are going to, the first 3 are going to focus on particular areas. You may remember that transportation accounts for 66% of our greenhouse gas emissions. Much of that has to do with our interstate and large highways that we have going through Lane County. We'll have a transportation focused meeting end of June, and then the rest will be in July. energy use in buildings and renewables, stuff we buy and use, the kind of upstream consumption-based inventory. And then we're going to try to do a couple of focus groups. We'd like to focus on the coast and the East County. I think that they have a particular set of interests, and we want to make sure that we're hearing from everyone in the community. And then Foothills and West County, they have another set of different issues to deal with. We're really, you know, as you all know, we have some pretty big geographic differences and so different concerns in each of those areas. Then we're going to also conduct 5 focus groups with institutionally underserved communities. We're working on what those will be. One, I really want to focus on, you might recall earlier today, you had a capstone group presenting on the holiday fire and some of the realities. There's a lot of older people who are homeowners, but still live in poverty. And we want to focus on that above 65 crowd, see if we can get a focus group of rural older folks to come in and talk to us. We're going to be looking at communities of color. We have the capacity to do a Spanish language focus group if we can find a community group that was interested in that. But we're going to try to conduct those throughout July and August. But really, we need to be flexible to be based on the community available. We want to try to go to where the communities are and not have them come to us. That online open house is going to be available for 5 weeks, and we'll promote it through the regular kind of PIO channels, but we also have a list of 100 contacts of different organizations. And we really do make an effort to get to a wide variety of folks. We don't want to just hear the choir singing on these issues. We want to know, especially that balance between climate action and job creation. And then we'll be summarizing that data from all these meetings, and those will be integrated into the climate action plan. And just to remind you, previous actions that we've taken, in September 2020, we did a community-wide climate action survey. That was the one that Haley referenced. In November 2020, we did a community-wide or county-wide greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And this spring, we held a series of stakeholder meetings with the utilities, the transportation folks, the cities. I had some interviews with folks from the agricultural community, from the forestry community, and refrigerants was another big one. So that's where we're at. The plan is, the plan is being written as we speak. Well, maybe not right this second, but I'm working on it daily, and the plan is to integrate this information into the work that our contractors are doing, and we're hoping that by the end of September, we'll have a draft to present to you and start community review.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I was muted.
I just panicked. I thought I presented that whole thing into nothing.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Nystrom from the board? Any members of the board? As I'm watching Commissioner eat popcorn that looks really tasty. Mr. Mark, thank you very much for the update. And I see no further questions.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, we are now on item 13, County Administration. Mr. Mokrahajski, are there any announcements?
Thank you, Chair. You've had a long day. I don't have anything additional for you unless you have questions for me.
I don't see anyone throwing up their hands. So with the board's consent, we'll move to item 14, Commissioner's Business A, announcements. Do any commissioners have any announcements? Yes, Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I'm excited to announce that the governor has designated the McKenzie area as an Oregon Solutions project for the recovery and rebuilding of that entire length of the fire-affected communities. This is a big deal for our region because we know that they are fully unincorporated. Without cities or local leadership, the county doesn't necessarily have the capacity to do the huge amount of work that it will take to bring the community together, do visioning, go through some of the technical requirements needed to recover and rebuild. And so we will be one of those projects, and Carmen Four heads Oregon Solutions. We'll be putting together some conveners and making a formal announcement out to the public shortly, but I'm excited for our community. Often in our interviews, it came up that they need a third-party entity to be able to convene everybody, and there's 60 miles of communities to come together and figure out how to recover. Some things will be permanently changed. Many things they'll be able to revision for a newer, stronger community upriver. So I just wanted to share that with the board. There'll be coming information on that shortly from the governor's office. I also, before I leave that, I really wanted to thank somebody in particular on that. Kathy Jaworski actually initially asked myself and Carmen Ford to come up to talk about perhaps what we could do to help rebuild the Upper McKenzie Community Center, which we know burned to the ground. After more discussion, after that meeting with several other local leaders, we came to the conclusion that Carmen's Office of Oregon Solutions actually has a lot more resources that could be brought to the plate. And very similar to what happened in the Vernonia floodings years ago. And so we've been working on this since October, November of last year. I'm just so excited for this for our community. I think it's going to be a wonderful way in order to facilitate a faster recovery for the area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. I can't underscore what a big deal it is. What you just mentioned. This is huge, and I think the board ought to, all of us, feel a sense of pride, ownership, and relief that this decision, which I thought the only logical way to go, has in fact, though, been made, and Commissioner Buck has been on it the entire time. Do you have any other announcements, Commissioner? Or was that it? I'm sorry.
Something separate, which may or may not be, well, it's probably for the next item in particular, but it does have to do with NACO and who's going and who we're going to allocate as a voting delegate. I will be attending in person. So there's a lot happening regarding the transportation and infrastructure bill that's going on in the discussions. And I'm on the Transportation Steering Committee. And if nobody else is joining me, I would like to request to be that voting delegate, as I'll be there in person. But we need to delegate somebody before the event. I'm not sure if people are going to attend virtually, which you can do as well.
My understanding is no other board member is physically attending. Is that correct, board? The NACO conference in July? Is anyone intending to remotely attend? Because I intend to go to a couple of sessions myself.
Same, I'll dip in and out depending on the agenda.
Okay. Mr. Mokrahajski, we heard you might be there. Are you going to be at NACO?
I will not be there in person. I'll be attending virtually.
I'm on two steering committees, so I'll be there at some level.
Right. Question, this is either to Commissioner Buck or to Mr. Mokrahajski. Does this board need to take any formal action to identify, in this instance, Commissioner Buck as the voting delegate for it?
That's a good question. I don't know that we've ever done that in the past. I'm not recalling that that the board has taken action. I'm looking to Commissioner Farr and Commissioner Bozovich, or maybe Commissioner Buck has an answer to that, just on what we've done in the past.
Does ask you this question when you register to attend. Have you been approved by your board to be the voting delegate? And so we may need some clarity involving this from Alex Kyler to be sure, because I'd like for us as a body to have that voice, whomever it may be. It doesn't have to be me, but I'll happen to be there in person. But if you're attending virtually, you could be a voting delegate as well. So it's up to us to determine if we want which individual to do that and to confirm with Mr. Kyler.
I have voted back there, Chair Buck, Commissioner Buck. I have, I think, designating you as the voting delegate, since you're going to be there, makes a great deal of sense. I don't recall that we've ever actually taken that action in the past, that just whoever's been in attendance has just assumed the role of the voting delegate. But that being said, I'm Chair Burney, I'm perfectly fine with the Commissioner Buck representing Lane County in that capacity.
I see two issues. One is this body fine with Commissioner Buck being the voting delegate representing us? And the second issue is, do we need to take any formal action? And if we do, of course, Mr. Kyler should, if we don't, we need to know. And if we do, we should have that in front of us at the next board meeting. Commissioner, I saw two hands up. First, I saw Commissioner Trieger's hand up. I didn't miss yours this time, Commissioner Bozovich, but hers was up first. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I was simply giving a thumbs up to supporting Commissioner Buck being our delegate at NACO.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Bozovich.
I'll just say in the 10 years I've been a commissioner, we've never designated somebody. And whoever attends votes as a singular commissioner. Most of the votes are voice votes, with the exception of the one vote that probably counts the most, which is that second vice president vote. And I'm reluctant to delegate my vote to somebody else on that particular issue because I don't believe I would agree. So I'm not willing to give all 5 of our votes to one person. If you attend and you're there, you cast your vote as a singular commissioner. I think what they're asking for is do you have the authority to vote in block for your commission? And that's, I don't believe I would agree with all the votes. So I'm not willing to give my authority.
Don't worry, Commissioner Bozovich. I'm not going to suggest we vote to take it from you. However, could we get some clarification on this, Mr. Mokraheisi from Mr. Kyler? And if any action is needed, could we make sure that we have that in front of us in time?
Yes, we can do that and bring back to you, either a couple of options or a recommendation. You have a little bit of time because I think it's the second week of July. So my plan would be, why don't we make that an assignment? So I'll cover it under review of assignments. If not next week, the 22nd. So I'm thinking maybe the 22nd, we can report back to the board with sort of some options, and you can decide what you want to do.
Does that meet with your approval, Commissioner Buck?
Absolutely. We just need to know probably by that meeting, because after that we're down for the holidays, and then on the 8th is the actual conference.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, if I might, for bringing this up, Commissioner Buck, because I didn't realize there was any gray or fuzzy area there, and this will enable us to make sure, if there is, it's clarified well before you attend. Thank you very much. Is there any other commissioners with any other announcements? Seeing none, are there any future board assignment requests? Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. As I mentioned this morning, I have 2 items. One is we received some testimony at our last meeting, and we all received email from someone from Occupy Medical on the critical need for supervised medical respite and hospice beds, and explaining to us that there's a new organization emerging in a transition as Occupy Medical returns to their roots, focusing on their Sunday clinics, but there will be a group picking up this work to carry forward advocacy for supervised medical respite beds. And I know we've had conversation as a board and as an organization, we support that. But they were seeking from us help of submitting a letter of support to bolster their conversations with Pacific Source, Trillium, and Peace Health, urging them to be active, engaged partners to help bring this project to fruition. And so I would like to seek head nods to ask County Administrator to work with staff to first determine whether it's one letter to all three entities or three separate letters, but that we could meet that request to provide a letter of support to Pacific Source, Trillium, and Peace Health to urgently move the work forward to secure supervised medical respite and hospice beds for unhoused folks.
Thank you. And that's a future board assignment request? Okay. Does that does not require head nods, does it?
I think it does, a letter of support from the board.
Is there any discussion on that request then? Thank you, Commissioner Krieger. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question maybe for Mr. Markohysky. We're working on medical respite beds on existing Lane County facilities and with a potential program for the future. Does this impact that at all? Is just any conflict or overlap with this request and what you are already working on?
I think my sense is that it's complementary to that work that we're doing. We are having the conversation. We did an RFP for design services for 100 River Avenue. We are including that as a potential option to be studied. And I think the request was from Occupy Medical was a support letter. And I think what I took from the Commissioner Krieger's request was to have staff draft a letter to community partners, but as part of that, consider kind of the timing of it and factor in this other work that's happening and bring that back to the board. Okay. So I think the idea is that this potentially could look similar to the Commons at MLK looked, where we had a number of community partners that all provided funding, or our behavioral crisis center that we're working on. And I think you heard an update from Ms. Gaffney potentially this morning at Agenda Team. We have a discussion next week on the behavioral crisis center. So kind of a similar type of outreach.
Okay, good. Then you have my head nod.
Thank you, Commissioner Farr. Are there any other commissioners that, Commissioner Buck?
I had two, one of which we talked about briefly earlier this morning, which is regarding a ban on fireworks during fire season. Last meeting, I actually had specified this concern regarding the 4th of July itself. And after talking with representatives from ODF, it became clear that this was more than just a one-day affair. The fireworks issue is actually a problem throughout our entire fire season. So I would like to get 3 head nods to talk about that kind of ordinance in more detail with input on specific triggering events, as Commissioner Bozovich had mentioned that could become questionable, and we need to be very clear about what that means for our community.
I would like to clarify here. We did not yet get head nods for Commissioner Krieger's thing, and I'm sorry. No, don't worry. But when I called on you, I thought you were going to speak to that, so I apologize for that.
I'm sorry, Commissioner. I thought we had already done 3 head nods.
No, that's on me. Well, that's kind of me. It's on both of us. Right now, though, if I may, unless commissioners want to speak to it, could we get head nods on Commissioner Trieger's request. Commissioner Farr, myself, Commissioner Trieger, you have your head nods. Now, Commissioner Buck, you don't need to repeat yourself, but does anyone want to speak to Commissioner Buck's request? I'm expecting Commissioner Bozovich to want to speak to it. No?
So I'll just say it sounds like Commissioner Buck is recognizing my concern about being specific around what the trigger point is, not just declaration of fire season. And I do agree, because that horrible fire up in the Columbia River Gorge was started by a firework. And it was not 4th of July. It was just some kids playing around being stupid. Not sure an ordinance would have stopped that, but that was the origin of that fire, was kids playing with fireworks. So it is a serious concern. I just want to make sure we don't stomp on a bunch of community celebrations accidentally by using the wrong trigger point when it really is a concern.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Farr, I'm sorry.
No apology necessary, Chair. Just to mention that every year we have issues around the 4th of July, and it does extend beyond, and it does come before the 4th of July. It's about time we did something definitive about it, at least at some level. So I'm in favor of moving forward with a work session or whatever is prescribed. That being said, each year when we get complaints, it's typically from the urban transition is where we hear the complaints, places that inside the urban growth boundary, outside city limits. And every year the sheriff still has no capacity to respond.
Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking to this issue, I just want to be sure that staff brings back the fullest complement of possibilities for us, because I've heard some concern, and I know there are some communities that have done these bans for personal fireworks, but they allow organized commercial displays where there's emergency vehicles and water on site. And so I'm not a proponent of one or the other. I would like to hear maybe some examples of what other communities have done that's been effective. If that's an option, just to keep that moving forward. And to the point of no capacity for enforcement, that will always be an issue, just like it's an issue where we don't do away with speed limits because we don't have the capacity to monitor every road all the time. It's not a reason not to do it. Every bit helps. So I'm supportive of this. And finally, not to this, just a reminder that I did have a second item when there's an opportunity, Chair, that I would like to speak to. Thank you.
So, Commissioner Trieger, not only did we interrupt the head nods on your first item, but we did not even get to your second. Okay, I apologize. Commissioner Buck, I have a question on this. Just listening to the responses, would you consider a work session on this as opposed to a future board assignment that would be a work session?
I would consider that I really want to see an ordinance. Let's just make that perfectly clear. I want to see something happen relatively soon. If we put this on as a work session, I'm afraid it's going to be after summer before anything ever happens, because it takes quite a long time for work sessions to move up to our agendas. If it could be placed on an agenda relatively soon, that makes sense before we move to the ordinance. But I want to just be clear, there are a lot of people out there that are seriously afraid of sparks, and any iota of smoke is triggering for them, and I'm hearing from it every single day.
Thank you. The reason I asked was not to table it. The reason I asked was, and by the way, I concur with your desires and your intent. I agree 1,000%. I'm looking forward to us addressing this and doing it right. And I think that kind of implies the issue that you're bringing and the timeliness, as well as the other considerations that Commissioner Bozovich mentioned. So I'm going to withdraw that. I just know this is going to be a long discussion, but we do get to get it moving. And Mr. Mokrahajski, there you go on that assignment.
Well, yeah, if I could clarify, Chair, because I was thinking actually a similar thing that, you know, drafting a letter or those kind of things are pretty straightforward for us to do if we have some background. This is a discussion. First of all, we have an open assignment, which you heard Mr. Dingle report to. And what I'm hearing Commissioner Buck is asking for is to sort of narrow that focus a little bit to look at sort of a longer term ordinance and that has a triggering component in it. So my thought is potentially I just want to see if this is acceptable or kind of what your thinking is, to amend or adjust the open assignment that we have already and ask, and I actually am thinking that potentially doing a work session, if we can do it here, you know, before the end of July, so that we can get feedback from the board on you can be provided with what your options are, and then we can get feedback on various considerations. That may further, because I'm just worried that otherwise we're going to ask staff to go draft an ordinance without full understanding of what you're wanting to accomplish. So I guess my question is, do you want us just to go draft an ordinance based on what you've talked about so far and bring that back? Or would you like to do a work session where we get some more clarity and direction from you?
I'm open to doing the work session in advance as long as it is not going to be 6 months before we talk about it. It needs to be relatively soon because we will be entering fire season very soon, as early as next week.
So maybe, since I'm also not the best person to decide whether or not we have all the information, if the assignment can be to request staff to research and draft an ordinance, and if needed, to schedule a work session if before the end of July is sufficient for you. I mean, I think we do have some down weeks here coming through June and July, but I think we could do it by the end of July, so that we have the flexibility that if we go, because we've asked Mr. Dingle, Mr. Clark, and Ms. Bell in land management to do that research component. And if we're adding on now, let's draft an ordinance. If they sort of don't have clarity around what should be in the ordinance and they feel like, no, we need to go to the board to get that clarity, we can come do it. If they're good and it's clear to them, then we can just draft it and bring it back to you. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Have we worked through that one, or would anyone like to object? Okay. Are there any other future? Well, I know there's one. I know Commissioner Trieger, you said we interrupted. You had a second request.
Thank you, Chair. As I mentioned again this morning, I want to talk about an acknowledgement for Indigenous Peoples Day. This legislative session, the state passed House Bill 2526, recognizing the second Monday in October, previously referred to as Columbus Day, to heretofore be referred to as Indigenous Peoples Day. Cities of Eugene and Springfield have enacted their own respective orders, making this kind of change years ago. And I think it's time for Lane County to demonstrate our commitment to the original peoples of this land, their language, culture, and rich traditions. I think it's time to set the record straight and to formally show our respect and honor the Willamette Valley's First Peoples. So I think this is a tangible action that we can take as part of our growing set of racial equity resolutions that we've passed and enacted over the last year. I think intentional action is required to make good on these resolutions. And I think Lane County should join this overdue growing local, regional, and national movement. So I am today seeking head nods that we direct County Administrator to work with community partners, our Equity and Access Advisory Board, and local tribal governments to identify the best way for Lane County to meaningfully acknowledge Indigenous Peoples Day and have it be effective this October. My hope is that by bringing this forward this far in advance, it will allow time for a good process that engages and involves community and, as I mentioned, local tribal governments as well.
Is there any discussion from commissioners on Commissioner Trieger's request before we see if there are head nods? Then a call for head nods. via a thumb up. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Are there any other future board assignment requests? Sorry, Commissioner Buck, you already had yours. Yes, Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. This may not be a work session, but I do recall around this time of year last year, we started in on winter strategies right after budget season. And it was one of the earliest times that we started reviewing what was going to be our winter strategies for our unsheltered folks in this upcoming season. I don't know that that's going to be part of the next update from the TAC report, but I do believe that it is something we need to start putting on our radar again early, so that we are prepared, and we need to know what our partners in the city are doing as well.
Commissioner Buck, are you through? Because Commissioner Farr had his hand up. Yes, Commissioner Farr.
Thanks. I agree. You know, window strategy is something we talk about all year long, and we do it on a regular basis. But this particular year, there may need to be some adjustments, in particular based upon current events. But significantly, staff has spends a lot of time on window strategies, and I think it would be enlightening for a lot of people to see exactly how much we have done in the past, and begin to look at this early. Any adjustments we may need to make to existing window strategies, bearing in mind that the first time we ever talked about window strategies about 8 years ago, we started talking in October for that winter. So we're now we talk about it year round. It's a matter of getting an update on what we are doing and making recommendations as to what we potentially can do to enhance what we're already doing. So I agree.
Any other comments on this? So would you restate what we are nodding our heads on? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Mokrahysky.
Well, I just wanted to share that we do have an open assignment for discussion on winter strategies to come back in a couple weeks. It'll be after budget adoption, but that is it looks like August 19th. Or no, sorry, that's not right. Well, it was made on August 19th of last year, it looks like. And so we're going to bring it back after budget approval, June 22nd. It's coming back.
I'm presuming, Commissioner, that takes care of that item. Is that correct?
Yes, it does for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners Farr or Bozovich, do you have any future board assignment requests? Commissioner Farr. Oh, okay.
I do not have a request at this point in time, but I will state that we have a semi-monthly report on housing and homelessness. We've received our first one already. I think a lot of people agree with me that that having it once every 2 months is not going to give us enough time to discuss it or enough opportunity to respond as tactics emerge. So at some point, maybe as early as next week, I'll want to talk about how do we change that every other month assignment to perhaps once a month. I've already spoken with Ms. Gaffney about it and Mr. Manella about this. So something that will be coming back as early as next Tuesday.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. And Commissioner Bozovich, yes, sir.
Thank you. I would like to ask for 3 head nods from the board to place the ordinance that would extend signature gathering for those signatures, for those petitions that were out for signatures during the COVID emergency, for another first reading and second read, and to schedule a second reading as we had originally proposed it. Last week's board meeting was a procedural mess up, and I would like to have that come back and actually have fair procedure. I think folks didn't realize failure of a second what it would do to the motion. And then we were short a member of the board later in the meeting to break ties. So I would really like to get agreement to bring that through a second time. It won't cost a lot of staff time, been written and everything. Just have to put a new ordinance number on it, schedule it for a first reading. and second reading. So that's all I'm asking for is 3 head nods to have that come back to us. I know that the folks that are involved in the petitions were extremely disappointed in what happened last week.
I do not see 3 head nods. Would anyone else like to?
And I understand your position on it. You weren't there last week, really, so thank you.
I don't know what that comment means, sir. I made clear from the very beginning I had a meeting that I had to leave for.
No. I mean, if you won't let it move forward again, then you basically don't support the ordinance. So that makes it clear that, yeah,
yes.
That's all I'm saying is it makes clear that the majority of this board does not support providing an extension for signature gathering for those petitions that got caught by a pandemic. I just want to make, wanted to get that clear and on the record.
Are there any other future board assignment requests? We are then on item 15, review of assignments. Mr. Mokrzycki.
Do you want to take a break before I review these? No, I'm just kidding.
Yes. At 6:30 this evening.
So I have 4 items here. Commissioner Trieger's request to have staff draft a letter to community partners regarding supervised medical respite needs. Commissioner Trieger's request to draft a board ordinance recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day. Commissioner Buck's request to review delegation of voting authority for the NACO conference for items to be voted on there. We'll have a staff report back on that by, I think we said June 22nd. And then Commissioner Buck's request to draft an ordinance for staff to draft an ordinance consistent with the prior open assignment on researching fireworks ban options to draft an ordinance that would trigger fireworks bans related to fire season with a possible work session if staff feels that it needs additional feedback from the board. Okay.
Did Mr. Mokrzycki catch everything to everyone's satisfaction? Okay. I thank you, Steve. I don't believe we have an executive session this afternoon. This brings us to our last item of business for the day, 17 other business. Do any commissioners have any other business? Well, I do. Earlier today, it was we heard a report from Mr. Adams that due to the extraordinary work of Lane County and all of our community partners, that Lane County now has achieved the 65% threshold. And we also learned that the governor's office approved our request for that to be effective as immediately as it could be, which is 12:01 a.m. tomorrow morning. So the first of my 2 requests is I would like to start having in-person meetings of this board in Harris Hall, perhaps as early as mid-August. And I wanted to know if any commissioner objected to that. Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I don't so much as object as would just like to hear. I know there were some challenges anticipated on part of staff of whether those would be open to the public, and if so, how we manage number of people, and if not, whether we have the technology for folks to phone in testimony or video, or just ironing those bugs out. So to me, the difference between mid-August and waiting till after the Labor Day holiday is minimal. And I would more just want to hear from staff about the logistics and the practicality, or if it's, after our down week in August, then we only have 1 or 2 meetings before the Labor Day holiday again. So just thinking about logistics in that regard, but I'm fully in support of ensuring that by no later than immediately following the Labor Day holiday. I don't feel a pressing need to do it before then, but I wouldn't block it.
Mr. Mokrihisi, can you speak to logistical concerns? Because it was my understanding that if we got started a little earlier, that would be for Board of Commissioners and presentations, but not public, and the technology was there. But am I incorrect? Logistically, is that an easy lift for staff or not?
Yeah, well, Chair, what we have said is we can certainly shoot for that August timeframe, and I think we'd want to do these are the board's business meetings, so this is really up to you to tell us. And so I appreciate the kind of deference and making sure, because there are some implications, and I think things you want to think through, particularly around public comment. We're going to want to think about a hybrid option for public comment, both in person and remote. How many people are we going to allow in person, accommodating staff and those kind of things. But if the board wants to start meeting in person, you say so, and we'll make that happen. I think the agenda team certainly can work through some of the dynamics around that. I will share with you that yesterday I had the opportunity to meet with the Eugene city manager, and she was gracious enough, Sarah Maderi was, to invite me over to their new offices at the Mary Spildy building downtown, and sort of tour me around their new space there, which is really great space. And they showed me where the city council is going to be meeting, and shared with me some of the things that they're actually doing that I think we can probably learn from. And she said, actually, she went and met with the city of Springfield team to learn from what Springfield was doing around making sure that, there are enough video screens up for everyone to see, the public that are calling in for public comment testimony, that counselors are able to see those people, and it actually feels more like they're in the room. So I think there are some really good things that we can look to our community partners around how they're using use of technology. But the short answer to the question is, we'll certainly be prepared to accommodate whatever the desire of the board is to begin meeting in person. And I'd say if there aren't objections to it, and the chair is sharing his thoughts about it, that we can have the agenda team continue to explore the logistics and dynamics and share those with you as we get closer.
Yes, Commissioner Krieger.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mokrihisi, I wonder if you could also please bring back to us any measures for enhanced safety in Harris Hall. We've had a real shift in the tenor and political discourse in our country since this board last met in person. We've made a few changes. I know some others are underway, but given all of that and the recent vandalism of the windows at Harris Hall, I would also love to hear a report back on any enhanced safety measures that we can anticipate as we return to meeting in person. Thank you.
Hey, I just thought it would be good to get on with it, and I look forward to being part of Commissioner Trieger's first in Harris Hall Board of Commissioners meeting. Are there any objections? I assume that this needs 3 head nods even to consider. So are there 3 head nods for looking at starting our meetings in person in mid-August at Harris Hall? Okay, we have the nods, and then I'm sorry, Commissioner Farr.
Just to know that mid-August we are down, and I will be at Lapine State Park that week.
So are there not? I don't have it in front of me. A couple of Board of Commissioner meetings in roughly mid-August.
The 10th and then the 24th.
Okay, so are there any commissioners that are planning to be gone either the 10th or 24th, and therefore it would be difficult? Oh, Commissioner Bozovich.
I'm going to be out of town for the 24th. I sent an email earlier today because my whole summer got turned upside down by a couple events recently, and that changed my summer plans. So I'm now going to be gone late August instead of late July.
Okay. Well,
and stuff like that.
Oh, no, listen, I understood completely. Well, Mr. Mocher, I see we can look into it, but at the same token, it sounds like Commissioner Bozovich, who I anticipate is looking forward to meeting in person, would not be here the 24th. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I'm completely supportive of getting back into Harris Hall. Look forward to it. I definitely support Commissioner Trigger's inquiry into safety. That also concerns me as well. But I also really want to see us in this hybrid mode. We all know that people are so used to being able to Zoom, and we should be able to have that capacity to see people in actual Harris Hall, be able to record it and get their audio at the same time. So I'm hoping, and I advocated for this early on, is that if one of us are gone and we were on a business trip, and I know Commissioner Bozovich was actually in Washington, D.C. in a hallway trying to call in and be into a meeting, and we should be able to do that wherever we are and be able to call into a meeting while some people are in Harris Hall and some people are not. So I just want to ensure that we advance our technology to be able to do that as soon as possible.
What I'm hearing, Mr. Mokrahysky, is, safety concerns, technology enabling certain things, but with all of this, looking at that possibility and seeing what's logistically possible or not, and then reporting back to this group. Does that make sense?
Certainly, Chair. And I think I would just say that the longer you wait to meet in person, the more time we will have to invest in upgrades and additional technology and those kind of things. The sooner we meet in person, the less time we will have to do that. So I just want to, just so that there's clear expectations and certainly trade-offs in that regard. My comments about, things that other jurisdictions are thinking about doing or planning to do, they're also not planning on meeting in person for a while. And so our intent certainly is to continue to invest in technology and to capture the benefits of what we've seen in the last year in terms of access to public information and public discussions. But that will take some time to get ultimately to where we want to be to.
Well, it sounds like we have enough votes to move it forward, and forgive me, but we've had about 15 months to start figuring this out. Now, I understand there have been other things on our mind. It's been an incredible time, but I'm glad I at least broached it. I'm glad it was received the way it was. The intent is just to start moving towards personalizing and social interaction, and practicing what we preach. As we're discussing, businesses can reopen more, and schools can reopen more, and some of those will be hybrid types of things, like I'm sure ours will. I appreciate this board considering that maybe we ought to do the same thing. So with that, this has been a long meeting. Are there any other items for the good of the board before we adjourn this meeting? Thank you, everyone. This meeting is adjourned.